Here's RFK Jr. on C-SPAN talking about the fact that he's finally catching on to the fact that the Democrats are not going to give him a fair primary. So here he is on C-SPAN talking about that and calling himself 10 times the threat that Bernie Sanders was to the Democratic brass. Here we go.
Well documented, the Democratic Party put their finger on the scale, their thumbs, their foot on the scale to make sure that Bernie Sanders could not get the nomination. I think if Bernie Sanders had gotten the nomination, we would be in a very different place in our country today. And but there's an antagonism and antipathy within the Democratic Party for people who have true progressive values, people who are challenging the predominance of Wall Street interests of companies like BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard, and the military-industrial complex. You know, the Democratic Party used to be anti-war. It's now at the forefront of promoting these forever wars, which are destroying our country. And so, you know, Bernie Sanders was a threat to that infrastructure, and I am 10 times the threat that Bernie Sanders was. And so I think that there's, you know, they've pulled out all the stops to make sure that that I will not threaten the donor base.
All right, so there's that. And then ABC News reported that at a recent town hall in South Carolina, RFK refused to rule out an independent bid when asked by an audience member if he would consider running on a third-party ticket if the Democrats did indeed, sideline him. Here's his answer. This was only on ABC News, so I could not get clean video of this, but we do have audio that's pretty legible, so we'll take a listen.
You know, they're not hiding anything. They're trying to make sure that I can't participate at all in the political process, and so I'm going to keep all my options open, and I'll know, you know, I'll have to make a decision after the 14th of this month.
By 14th of this month, he means 14th of next month. October 14th is some kind of deadline, apparently. So apparently, if he does decide to switch, it will be within a few weeks. All right, let's play the rest.
President Biden is losing not only to Donald Trump by 3 points, but to every Republican candidate, tying with DeSantis, and the only one he can beat is Vivek. And that's the CNN poll that came out 2 days ago. Oh, and there's poll after poll over the past 2 months, including our private polling, showing him losing to almost every Republican.
Okay, so there's a couple different questions that I have for you about this, Danny. On the wholesale point of RFK being a bigger threat than Sanders, to me, just from a horse race point of view, just these two clips alone make him a bigger threat to the Democratic Party in one sense, which is that unlike Bernie Sanders, there he is making a somewhat, although not so veiled threat as at an independent run, possibly. But also, unlike Bernie Sanders, RFK is willing to say Biden's going to lose. Bernie never said Biden would lose. Bernie never, when they asked Bernie Sanders, could Biden beat Trump? He said, well, yeah, sure he could. You know what I mean? He kept his powder dry in a lot of those key moments. So in at least those two cases, I would have to agree that RFK is at least attempting to pose a bigger threat than Bernie Sanders. He doesn't have nearly the polling support that Bernie had. So in that very literal sense, he's not as big a threat. But in terms of the foreign policy stuff, what is your analysis of that statement? Is he more threatening to the establishment than Bernie was?
Oh, it's a complex question because I think both of them have both major flaws, and of course, both of them, at least during the campaign,
sure,
that they ran, had also elements that went against the grain. You know, Bernie Sanders certainly railed against the military-industrial complex and certainly took various positions on certain issues that were perhaps better than the Democratic Party establishment, while also then, depending on which one it was, would flank to the Democratic Party establishment on those issues.
Right.
So, and we saw how deeply that affected Bernie Sanders' campaign in 2020 when they started to rushigate him and he couldn't push back. he had no opportunity. He didn't push back one bit. Now, I think RFK Jr. has it's very different in terms of how it looks, but a very similar problem, because on Ukraine, certain issues very good, and then of course I know you've covered this, many have covered this. His uh, deep loyalty to Israel
Sure.
is one that is probably so glaring. Bernie Sanders didn't really have that. I mean, Bernie Sanders, we can make quibbles about, oh, is he left enough on Israel?
He
But
more or
at the
less
very least,
punted on it. I mean, he said some
yes,
good things,
yes,
but he basically punted on it.
exactly. So, uh, but and we can quibble about, well, is there any difference between that and being deeply
Right.
loyal? I
Sure.
think in optics, there's a big difference,
Sure.
and also how RFK Jr. has behaved, literally currying Israel
Right.
lobbyists into his campaign. So there's just deep problems here in terms of whether he's 10 times the threat. I saw someone in the chat say something that I would agree with. 10 times 0 is still 0.
Right.
I would say that, even if he maybe looks more of a threat because of certain positions he takes and because of the things that he said, because I think those are very impactful, to say something like Joe Biden is not going to win. I do think that maybe chalks up more to the situation that we're in than it does to RFK Jr.'s himself as being some kind of threat. Given what he's also said about how he will, support Biden if Biden is the nominee. He's a Democrat. He's promoted himself as a Democrat through and through, at least up until this point. It's hard to believe that his foreign policy agenda will be that much different. It's unclear
Well, he has
how.
said, I don't mean to cut you off, but he has
Yeah,
said in the past that he doesn't think he could endorse someone who supports the war. So he hasn't
right,
been as forceful, not nearly as forceful, in fact. In fact, he hasn't really unequivocally stated he will certainly endorse Biden
right.
when he loses the nomination. So there is that to just
Right,
sort
right,
of
right,
put
right.
out there.
No. I think all these things are significant to a degree. I guess it's just hard for me to believe, given his loyalty to Israel, and also, for it doesn't seem like foreign policy is really at the top of his campaign outside of Ukraine. Ukraine is the big hot war,
Right, sure.
and it's true, and it should be in many ways at the top of anyone's campaign that's trying to run an alternative campaign. I wouldn't question that, but I would question, just given what he's done on just that singular question of Israel, how deeply committed he would be to any kind of peace agenda. I was very critical of Bernie Sanders, even at his best moments,
Right.
that given that he couldn't really go against the grain on the U.S.'s war on Syria and various other, and just the ways in which he refused to take positions outside of the Democratic Party on the specifics of U.S. foreign policy while railing against the budget and all of that, just made it so he would, on the one hand, maybe touch on war fatigue and be effective in that way, while signaling to the establishment that he will play ball. And I think RFK Jr., given the state of electoral politics, does this to a significant degree. And for RFK Jr., for all the things that I could agree with him on, I even see the way he's just running his campaign right now. He's trying to raise as much money as he can with whoever is his friends, and it's difficult to see how in this moment he could really be a candidate that is insurgent to any degree. For
Well,
me,
certainly
he
not
is.
inside the Democratic Party. Certainly
No,
not.
no, no. And he chose that very willingly. And I think Bernie Sanders, that was his main flaw to begin with anyway. I remember when Jill Stein tried to offer him the Green Party nomination, he gave her the bird, essentially. And that, I think, shows the limitations at the end of the day, is that these candidates, if they are truly committed to the Democratic Party, it's hard to take stock in what they say as having any kind of significance should they gain enough support to be a candidate with any kind of viability, even on the debate stage. We can't even get candidates on the debate stage in many ways
Oh yeah, no,
when
that
they're
ship has
third
sailed. I
party.
mean, that's over.
And the
That
DNC
whole
is not
phase is
going to
over.
allow RFK Jr. up there either.
No,
So
no, absolutely not. RFK is also hawkish on Iran, which is sort of inconsistent with his policy on Ukraine. So yeah, no, obviously very, very flawed in a number of ways that we've talked about at great length on this show in the past. But I think one of the things that may have him tempted to run independent, and I never thought I'd be saying this, is the fact that, his coalition is kind of amorphous. Like the Bernie coalition was basically progressive Democrats and then some Greens and independents who were further left than the Democratic Party, but it was left, left, left. RFK's coalition is very different, which is why he did the border documentary, right? I mean, he has a lot of conservatives in that coalition, which means were he to run as an independent, he'd probably pull fairly equally, I would think, from both major parties, which could make a third-party candidacy of his particularly interesting if he chooses to go there. He's been adamant that he is not considering it for the past several months. Now, changing his tune slightly. I guess we'll have to wait and see, but we won't have to wait and see that long because apparently he said he'll know by mid-month. The other thing is they put this caveat there. Well, if the Democrats screw me, then I'll run third party. Well, what does that mean if the Democrats screw you? Because, look, they would screw him if they had to. They're not going to really have to screw him. I mean, he is polling nowhere close to Joe Biden. So what happens if they say, all right, fine, I guess we'll what? Like, what does it mean to not rig it against you at this point? You want a debate? You can't really get a debate. I mean, Donald Trump won't show up at the debates in the RNC because he has such a great polling lead. He figured, why would I? If the DNC had debates, Biden could say the same thing. Why would I show up at a debate when I'm up by 50 points? So, like, what would the Democrats have to do or not do to actually get him to say, okay, this constitutes rigging, therefore I'm running independent? If you're really serious, you just say I'm running independent anyway. If I lose a nomination, that's it. I'm running independent. And so we haven't quite heard that, but it's interesting that he put that mid-October date out there as the point past which we will know for sure either way.
Yeah, and you bring up many good points. I think that the whole notion that the Democratic Party maybe hasn't rigged it enough for him yet is, it is, I guess, disconcerting. He's trying to run a campaign. It's obvious that he does have. I think you're correct on his. Sorry about that. That's my doorbell for some reason. But he does have that kind of political support across the aisle. I know that there's concern about that among the Democrats, and they should, because the Democrats, the Democrats don't care about what things like we care about, which is, can we, mobilize or get enough people to push this system to the brink and truly make some changes, regardless of the means. For someone like RFK Jr., he's looking to win a campaign. He's looking to get as far as he can as president. And the Democrats should be concerned in the sense that someone like him obviously has more appeal because of the fact that he will take positions that run against the grain from them. And the danger is that he, given his name too, he could build enough political support for at least an impressive looking third party run. It's hard to know what kind of party he would be a part of, though, given his political sentiments at this point. But for me, I think that RFK Jr. is really difficult to trust in any sort of way. I have suspicions about all politicians that are running electorally at this point, and even grassroots ones, given that the pressures of running a campaign, trying to win, and also trying to make it as effective, at this point runs against perhaps the interests of the vast majority of people, because at some point you got to try to find a way to get in and to win, and that really takes a lot of compromising, even for the Green Party to try to get the 5% necessary to get the matching funds and to get on the debate stage. All of that in and of itself is so difficult that it's hard not to make certain compromises to make the campaign as effective as possible. So for RFK Jr., it's hard for me to trust him, given all that, how he has behaved up until this point, and now saying he's going to be maybe going independent. I just don't know how seriously I can take it as something that would move the needle in any kind of significant way for at least the purposes of building a alternative to the Democratic Party.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting answer. I mean, we got Cornell polling at around 5 now. You have No Labels threatening to get in. They had a big enrollment drive in Arizona where they registered 15,000 people in their party, which sounds insignificant, but that's actually about Biden's margin of victory there in 2020. So it's not nothing. And on top of that, now, if RFK entered, he would definitely get significant support. And you've watched our show a bit, and anybody who has knows we are far from RFK stands here. But at the same time, I do support anybody getting in the race just to cause chaos within the system, right? I mean, I think to the extent there's any strategy in 2024, it is to disrupt. And so if Cornel West can disrupt, I wish him well in that endeavor. If the Libertarians put up someone good, I think that'd be great. Even if these no labels people run somebody, I mean, they would run some scumbag, but so what? Who cares? I'd say the more the merrier. The more support we can extract from the two major parties, that is an opportunity we should not forego. And if RFK ran independent, I think it would be great. I think he'd have a lot of crossover appeal. I think he'd get a lot of support. And just how great would it be on election night to see 5 candidates, with significant vote totals instead of 2? I mean, I think it would be
a disaster for the elites. That's for sure.
Exactly. So, I mean, I think in that respect, it's worth it.
Yeah, totally. I think and this is going to come. I don't know if it's going to come in this election cycle, but it's obvious just with Cornel West, RFK Jr., the fact that there is now, and despite all of the contradictions with all of their campaigns, it is now looking like the whole Bernie Sanders strategy that's kind of died. There's not going to be any kind of hope that there will be this one individual who will bring together all the disaffected Democrats and push forward, push through, and make a significant challenge to the Democratic Party establishment. That's not going to happen. So now it is looking more like we're going to see more and more efforts to break basically the duopoly into as many pieces as possible, which could then, I agree with this, so it definitely could lead to a more favorable terrain to have real, and I think this is the problem that we're facing now, especially in the political, even just discourse, but organized, forget it. It's just, how do we have genuine conversations and debates that can move things forward so we can have a coherent, quote unquote, left? Like, if we're going to be a left, how can we be coherent and united on issues that we need to be united around, while also continue to have debates on issues that perhaps we're not going to find unity on now? How do we build that kind of movement? And we can't do that if we're always having to harken back, because so many people harken back to their, to their instincts to just support whichever duopoly party they need to hold their nose for, regardless of if it's Democrats or Trump, GOP, whatever. There are significant numbers of people in the United States that simply just do that. Of course, excluding the Democratic Party loyalists, the GOP loyalists, and even Trump loyalists, who are not all the most rational people, contrary to maybe some public opinion. There are many people who just vote for Trump because of Trump, who just vote GOP because it's the team they play ball for. It's really those folks who are holding their nose that we need to reach. And that's enough people, I think, to make a significant difference. So any way to break that up, to split people's sentiments and loyalties to alternative vehicles is a good thing, and will allow for then a real debate to happen on, well, what does an alternative really look like? Because I don't think it should look libertarian. I don't think it should look like RFK Jr. I don't think I don't think it should look even like the Green Party, as much as I align with the Green Party on many issues. But if there can be more of a base of people who are considering those options, then we can truly have it out on what it should really look like as a united kind of movement.
Please clap.